Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. My name is Michael Wright. I'll be your host for the morning break, and I'm delighted to welcome the amazing Mr. Patrick Johns. Patrick, how are you?
I'm very well, Mike. Very well. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I hope you're having a lovely Saturday morning, as it is. And we are delighted to share with you our discussion, our expertise on improvisation and creativity in education. And before we go into the discussions for this next over about half an hour or so, in terms of what's happening on the show, we'd just like to introduce ourselves to you so you get a bit of a context about who we are, where we come from, and how we can kind of share our expertise with both improvisation and creativity. So I work as a director of music at Kingsley School, Devon, North Devon to be particular. And my background actually is in music education, but also as a professional musician. I'm a jazz musician by trade. So I would say I've engaged the vast majority of my professional career as an improviser, working with jazz musicians or working with musicians who work in the realms of improvisation and creativity. I started teaching around about 2014 and have been working in state school, private schools, further education colleges, as well as other various educational settings. So I would very much describe myself as a teaching musician, even though I've been teaching long enough now to be more of a teacher. I still think like a musician, and I still think in those kind of realms of creativity. More pertinently, I completed my master's degree a couple of years ago, and I did my dissertation, and a lot of my research was on improvisation, more specifically music improvisation in secondary schools. So I was very fortunate enough to interview Patrick here, as well as other people, in regards to strategies, activities, and methods. And it's something that I've been doing ever since. And I've found that from my research, there's a loads that I can glean on as an improviser and teaching improvisation, which will hopefully benefit those listening today. Patrick, would you like to kind of tell everyone a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, I'm Patrick Johns. I teach in a school, selective grammar school in southwest London. And I've taught music for goodness, 17 years now in a variety of schools. I've taught in private colleges, and I've taught in PRUs, and I've taught in state schools and so on. So quite a bit of variety. As well as that, I'm 0.6, but as well as that, I played the trombone professionally in a whole variety of styles, some orchestral, lots of jazz and funk and soul and umpa and things like that. And I also have worked in broadcasting for a long time. I used to be full-time in broadcasting and then moved into teaching. But going back, 25 years, I was making lots of jazz and classical programs for national radio, and have continued to do that on the side in kind of smaller projects, as well as getting into podcasting, as the whole world has done in the last 5 years, which is no bad thing. So yeah, I'm also quite gobby, and I sort of speak out. I rarely stop talking, and sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong. But yeah, the other thing I do is I make lots of educational resources and do lead CPD sessions, and yeah, anything to do with music and creativity and questioning stuff. I like to question why we're doing this, and I know that doesn't single me out at all. Lots of teachers do that, but I find it very easy. Not very easy. Sorry, I find it an attractive thing to do, to kind of look at the status quo and say, why is it the status quo? And I think that's because my very first job when I moved to London in 1998 was actually as a proofreader. So I did 2 years proofreading and got that kind of eye for detail and that eye for, well, why? And does that really help? And there are lots of things. There was a discussion on a social media group 2 days ago, yesterday even, saying what are the things that were temporarily so important in teaching that we've now completely abandoned, and people were coming out with all these acronyms and things from the past, and that makes you think, okay, so why are we so confident the things that we're doing now are the right things? when if you look at the trail of acronyms for the past 20 years and more, which have been abandoned and now slightly sneered at, why are we so confident that now we've got it right and this is the thing for the next century? Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
anyway, I don't claim to be an expert on anything, but I do know stuff, and I'm very happy to share it.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. And yeah, I mean, you've touched on a lot of what we will be talking about today with improvisation and creativity in education. We just need to mention as well, we're both musicians and music educators, but the purpose of today's discussion is really just to glean in our experiences as improvisers and as teachers who teach improvising and kind of work within the realm of creativity. We're really keen to broaden that to the education spectrum. So we won't be specific to music. We want to be as broad as we can to other subjects. You know, of course, our background is in music teaching, so a lot of the examples that we have firsthand experience will be based upon our own teaching. But we'll try to, you know, make it accessible for all and use our own creativity to think about how we apply our teaching of improvisation into other areas. And in addition to that, we'll also be talking about improvisation pedagogy. We'll be talking about the teaching and learning aspect, how improvisation and creativity can really be embedded into there, into planning as well, the day-to-day things that we do as teachers. As in addition to that, we're going to also look at the cultural aspects of improvisation and creativity. So Patrick mentioned about, you know, all the acronyms that Patrick was using, you know, some time ago in his teaching career. Why is it now that, you know, things seem to be right now and they were wrong earlier on? And from my experience of improvisation, it's only really now over the couple of years music teachers are talking about it, but no one's really spearheading it. You know, it's almost like this improvisation is almost, it's not really hasn't been used much, and it's something that I think, not as a music teacher, but we all use it. We use it every time. But more importantly, we'll also be mentioning the potential misnomers and negative stereotypes of improvisation. So what does it mean when someone says, oh, just improvise this or improvise that? Do we have any negative stereotypes? Do we have associations with it, really? So let's begin with them. Patrick, there's a question I've asked myself many times with my research and my teaching. What do we mean by creativity and improvisation? How do you define the two? Are the two linked or are they separate? So how would you define it for your own?
Well, improvisation is inherently creative. And I think that the word improvisation is not used in many subjects. It is used in music sometimes, though nowhere near as much as it should be. I'm guessing, not being a drama specialist, I'm guessing it's used in drama a fair amount. I would like to know how many other teachers use the word improvisation in their lessons. I'm going to guess very few, even though that is a lot of the time what the students are doing and they're being creative. Problem solving is creative. Sorting out some heavyweight A-level maths equation or physics work, solving that problem is creative. Improvisation comes into it. One hopes that the students are not just being robots, being mechanically trained to, you know, this is the formula, these are the numbers, work out the solution. Of course, that's part of it, and that is a great thing to do. But so much of that will come down to creativity. Or when you write an essay, or when you are researching something, you are making creative decisions about what to include and what not to include. And that process of decision making, to an extent, is improvisation. And of course, the obvious example, speaking. We all improvise all the time when we're speaking. We improvise conversations. But this all comes back to the fact that we all have vocabulary. So you and I can improvise in English, as we do now, because we both speak English. You and I cannot improvise in Icelandic, because unless you've got this hidden talent that I don't know about, we don't speak Icelandic. Therefore, it proves that improvisation is not just, in inverted commas, making it up on the spot. You have to have that background to it. And one of the things I think is quite well, good and bad about improvisation is the fact that kids are brilliant improvisers. well, we all are, but kids particularly, because they're still building up their vocabulary of life and so on. So my youngest is 6, and the way he will try to explain what he wants sometimes, because he doesn't know a certain word, so he'll describe it in this kind of, and he just finds a way around it. And what I think is quite sad have that. I was going to say beaten out of them. I don't clearly mean beaten out of them. I mean their schooling removes that element because they are taught processes that are right rather than you could find a way. I'm going to counter that immediately by saying it does kind of annoy me when, like with composition, for example, and this will apply to other subjects as well. There are ways of doing things. There are methods that have worked for hundreds and hundreds of years, and we are letting the students down if we don't tell them that these things work.
Yes.
So the same with grammar. This is how to spell a word. This is how grammar works. You can't just kind of do your own thing, man. Anyway, so the original question was, what is creativity? Improvisation. Improvisation is acting on unplanned decisions. Sorry, yeah, is that the way to put it? Unplanned, doing something that you had not necessarily planned to do exactly in that way at that time.
Absolutely.
Whether that's a musical phrase you're playing, whether it's a line in a drama production, whether it's in a maths thing, equation, like, actually, hang on, maybe I could just do that. If I bring that in, maybe that will work. It's problem solving, and it's having that ability to fearlessly kind of go into battle with your problem and know that you'll come out the end okay.
Yeah, you've raised some very good points, and I think I'll add one more caveat to that is with improvisation, even though it is in the moment and you are creating something which has been quote unquote unplanned, actually there's a lot of planning that goes before the unplanned. So you're almost preparing for something that may or may not happen.
Mm-hmm.
So the term that, I'll mention it for teaching. So door handle teachings, it's something that has been, when I first trained as a teacher and as I've gone in, it's had quite negative connotations. Door handle teaching, the teachers that don't really know what they're doing or haven't got an idea for a year 8 class on a Friday morning. And then as they're walking from the staff room to the classroom, before they open the door, they create their lesson. And that was always shown to me in the trainings that's bad practice. You've got to come in and you've got to have the plan and you've got to have everything. I would counter that an experienced teacher, one who's been in many different educational settings and has experienced the good, the bad, the ugly, perhaps they had a plan. And as they were walking, they had a moment of doubt going, hang on a minute, it's year 8, period 1. So-and-so wasn't here last week. There was a fight yesterday between these two people. Right, that plan isn't going to go to, okay, right, let's think, blah, 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 open the door. Okay, everyone. I think actually that improvisation really is a process beforehand of experiences. And it was explained to me by Simon Purcell, who's basically an improvisation guru, one of the figureheads of music improvisation in this country, explained to me as a Rolodex of ideas. And I think the best improvisers in any context have this Rolodex of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they can literally cycle it at will. And the improvisation comes from doing something, acting something which is unplanned, but actually going, do you know what? I've got a solution for that. So that teacher who comes in and has to think on their feet to change the planning of the lesson.
That's improvisation, and we all do it. We absolutely all do it. So I'm thinking back now to one of my year 8 lessons in my first PGCE placement. And I had my lesson plan that I'd faithfully done with my timing. So 5 minutes of this, and then we'll do that for 5 minutes, and then we'll do 15. Main 1 will be this, and then main 2 will be that, and then we'll have AFL and blah, blah, blah. And the lesson was, and I'm not going to swear, but it was a something show. And that was partly because of student behavior in that really pretty tough school. It was partly due to my utter inexperience at discipline and classroom practice. I was so new to it all. And even though I was an improvising musician and had plenty of experience of improvisation in life and could call it improvisation, I was unable to improvise in that moment because I was unable, I had no vocabulary on which to draw, whether that was as simple as issuing sanctions or dealing with confrontation or whatever it was. And I can remember it because we all have that in our PGCs. We all have one lesson where we get destroyed. And I can remember standing at the front and adding a minute onto how late they'd have to leave the lesson. I'm going to keep you behind for like, it's going to be 2 minutes now. They didn't give a damn. And I had nothing, and I was aware I had nothing. And I stood there with my hand up doing 3, 2, 1, whatever. And they were looking at me like I was a complete clown. And now, if that happens 15, 16 years later, I've got 15 or 16 years of experience. So I know certain things will not work. And I learned and I don't make this out to be me being any special from any other teacher, I hasten to add, but you have that experience, don't you? You can say, I've been in this situation before. This is what I did last time. It was a terrible decision and it made things 100 times worse. And the fallout was huge. I will now not do that. And that's a split second. So you do something else. And then maybe you improvise something. Any decision making like that is improvisation. All teachers are brilliant improvisers because you have to be, but the word is not used. And I think we can acknowledge that that's what we're doing, and you can then transfer it directly across to something like music or drama, where if I encounter a difficult chord change for the first time, I may decide to have a little breath then, or just find a little way around it and hope no one remembers. Whereas when I encounter that chord sequence for the 20th time, I've planned something out. Even if it sounds like improvisation, I know that little arpeggio with the flat and fifth and fall down will work, and then it becomes part of my vocabulary.
Absolutely. And then so it kind of moves very nicely onto strategies, activities, and methods. So let's begin first of all with music strategies, activities, and methods. There's some things that when I was preparing the chat, I was kind of looking at some of my research and finding out the most pertinent things to discuss. And there's a wonderful quote from Philpott and Spruce from the Debates in Music Teaching, which I should have it on the wall somewhere, or at least it's one of these maxims that I since I heard it, I live by it. The nature of music education should reflect the very nature of music itself. Substitute the word music with whatever it is, or even just take out the word music and just say the nature of education should reflect the very nature of perhaps life itself. And what we're talking about improvisation, to not include improvisation, to not acknowledge, to diminish its power, I think actually is a truism for how we want our students to be and how we want them to be as learners and as people.
It's how you can model the work as well, isn't it?
Yes.
The majority of music teachers are not confident improvisers in the sense of, here is a chord sequence, here is your instrument, play a solo in a jazz or blues or rock style. And it's a lot easier to belittle, possibly inadvertently, or almost probably inadvertently, to belittle something you yourself can't do, because it makes it more palatable for the students. And if you have shown them that this thing is actually just something we have to do for this style of music, and you kind of dismiss it a little bit, then it makes it easier, and you can make excuses for the fact you yourself can't do it, as opposed to saying to yourself, well, look, I am teaching blues, I am teaching jazz, and wouldn't it be a great extra tool for my toolkit if I up my game a little bit and learn how to do this and challenged it? But teachers, we learn all the time. We know that. We often learn within our comfort zones, all things we don't really want to have to learn, like, old school CPD for the sake of it. You know what I'm talking about, right? There's some good stuff, there's some less good stuff. But essentially, the learning we do is stuff we want to do, whether we're learning cooking or Duolingo or any other provider of language learning. So if we have to learn a new skill within our comfort zone, i.e. music, have we got the time to do it? And also, it takes a long time. Like I was saying about my terrible discipline in my PGCE, it's taken a long time to get to the stage where I'm much more confident doing it. It takes a long time to be a confident improviser. Have people got the time to do that? It's really worth it, though. It's really worth it.
Yeah, it totally is. So in terms of the starter that most music teachers use, we normally use call and response as a good way of getting our classes ready. What I tend to do with call and response is I give my students a rhythmic idea, normally using body percussion. I play, they copy. I normally do one bar, they do one bar. If I do two bars, they do two bars. So I kind of stretch them in that way. Then after I've done it enough times, I've given them maybe 5 examples. Then I say, right, now it's your turn. So normally go, and it might sound nerve wracking, but actually as a engaging register, if you will, to register the class, it actually works quite well, and it's a good way to get students on in the lesson and with the moment. So I normally go around a semicircle, and then each student then have to think of a rhythm, have to improvise a rhythm, and then as they play, we copy. So that's a really quick, effective, tried and tested approach to getting students to think on their feet in terms of creating in that moment. We also have used pass the pulse as well. So there's a tempo. So to keep timing. So if we're looking at, timing and time signatures in music, again, in a semicircle, we're getting students to clap each beat of the pulse. And as they clap each beat of the pulse, we can then look at improvising a rhythm. So for 4 beats in the bar, four beats in the bar for 4/4. If they're clapping each beat of the bar, the next time I'll do it, I'll get them to think about a rhythmic pattern on an individual beat. So if it's student number 1, they're beat 1, beat 2, beat 4, and so forth and so forth. So they're really, really good ways of modeling examples, but also scaffolding improvisation. Again, it's not telling them, go on, play something, clap something, use body percussion. That's incredibly vague and not helpful.
Well, that's what I was, if I may just jump in then, it's the vagueness and the unhelpfulness and the realisticness of the task is something that I have in the past, or certainly when I started doing, I think not done very well. So it was a similar thing where I would sort of clap or play a 1 bar rhythm, and the kids would have to improvise one back. But for students with very limited vocabulary, there's also a limited number of ways you can clap back. If you've got a class of 25 or 30, there's a limited number of interesting rhythms that students of that age have got that they can come back. So they end up copying you or copying the previous person. I mean, we've all been, regardless of subject, we've all been in lessons where we say, who can tell me such and such? Oh, what did you think of that? Oh, everything I thought of has been said already. And that's probably true, but it also could be a really easy way out. And that makes you think, well, then it wasn't really a very good question for me to ask, was it? There wasn't enough, or maybe I dwelt too much on the first group in them telling me all the things about it. So the task has to be realistic. Because I remember going back to these kids and going, no, that you just copying the last one, which was kind of true, but they had done their best. And I was aware we've still got like another 12 kids to get through, and we've all run out of ideas already. And my ideas are actually suffering a little bit. And I guess in other subjects that applies equally. If like you can tell me one thing about Henry VIII or whatever it is, or one thing about irrigation, it is the length of time you're asking and the number of students you're asking realistic that they can all, and they will be improvising their answers. If they're telling you stuff about Henry VIII, it will be stuff that they know, their vocabulary, and they are improvising the exact wording of it. They're not reciting the script from a play. Well, we hope not anyway, unless it's a drama. So yeah, it's important to make sure that the tasks are realistic and don't go on too long. So you don't necessarily need to do everybody. Obviously, in the register you do, but you don't necessarily need to do everybody in the class. You'll just know when the task is run its course. It's fine to stop it early, I would say.
Yeah, and absolutely. Because if you overegg the pudding, so to speak, the spontaneity and the whole fun of creativeness goes.
And it also then kind of not belittles the task, but it takes away from why are we doing this task. If everybody has cottoned on to the fact that essentially we're now going through the motions, well, this teacher isn't actually that passionate about the subject. They've told us to improvise a rhythm. I'm copying the previous kid who copied the previous kid, and the teacher's saying that's okay. So this task is actually pointless.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? The task has got to have that validity from the teacher. It has to be worthwhile, well thought out, The way I'm talking about it now makes it sound like you've got to do an hour's planning for a 5-minute task. Not at all. This is stuff you try it out once, you maybe refine it, you get it right, then you've got it for life. But yeah, I mean, improvising in registers, or just musical improvising, getting the kids to tell you information depending on what the subject is. I'm just going to point at you. I need one fact about such and such. I need something we learned last week. That may run out quite quickly. Expand it. Okay, we've done the first 5. Or just pointing at kids. It's a great thing to do. It makes them think on their feet, and it tells them, I can do this.
Yes.
I did it last period. I'm doing it this period. This is great.
You just reminded me of something which I think could benefit drama, because I've done it when I was teaching drama, but also, dare I say, English and history as well. So with one of my starters for drama, when I was a drama teacher, I would get them to improvise a story, and I would start the story, and each person would then need to think about where the story goes. So once upon a time, a pig wandered into a farm, and then I pass it on to the next person, and then the next person needs to think about the story and what did that pig do, in the farm, what happened in there. So thinking on your feet, but also broader thinking, divergent thinking. The student needs to think, right, pig, farm, what does that associate? Well, does the pig, live happily in the farm, or is the pig gonna,
were you doing that in order? So the kids are sitting in a circle, or in a line, or in a group? Because that makes you think of something that, and I know you were there actually, when in the session that we both went to with Simon Purcell and Pauline Black, and it was a similar thing. We told the story verbally, and it was in response to a prompt of a slide of a picture, but we didn't get to see that slide until it was our turn, so we couldn't plan anything. Do you remember? So if you're talking about the pig going to the farm, if I know there's 5 or 6 more people before me, I can say to myself, well, essentially there's no wrong answers. Cool. So I can just say, okay, the pig grew wings and flew into the town centre. And then it doesn't really matter what's come before. I don't need to know, so long as I know that there is a pig and I can say anything, they can kind of plan it. You could argue that is sort of improvisation. Whereas if you are suddenly put in the moment, so here's the next slide, and it's a beach, and here's the next slide, and it's a glass of water. How are you? Because then you've got all the different things. There's the pig; it's on the farm, but that's a beach. Now, how am I going to get the pig to the beach? Did they receive a postcard from a friend who's on holiday? Did they decide to book a holiday? Did it turn out that the farm was on the coast? And they've got to make very, very quick decisions. And I think that's something that is a great exercise, and you can use that in almost any subject, couldn't you? If you plan, if you get some slides in order, and it could be, I mean, some subjects I guess are easier than others, like history or others.
I was going to say, with history, if you're teaching a topic, let's say you're teaching particular like 1,000-Year War or whatever it is, you could potentially do that, provided if you've done enough. So this probably starter would be, I would say, mid to the latter part of any scheme that you teach. You could start it with, right, once upon a time, you set the setting for the war, and then the next person then needs to recall the information of what happened, but then they need to improvise how to present it, or a narrative of it. So rather than just recite the information as learned, as wrote, then they'll need to think about, visualize the story, visualize what's happening, and then they'll need to present it. So this could absolutely be adapted for history, if you're teaching anything like that. There's another idea I came up with as I was thinking about this, and please, chemistry tutors, don't laugh at me if I say this, because I probably know you're going to have a little chuckle. When you're teaching students about what to mix and what not to mix, i.e. what's going to likely cause an explosion and what isn't, once you've done enough context in the scheme work about it, I thought, as a nice little starter, as a little improvised starter, what would happen if you mix this with this? And then the students would then need to come up with their own mixtures, if you will. So not only that, not only are they improvising and free choosing whatever elements are on the period table, whatever it is, but they also need to think about, if we put this with this, what is actually going to happen? So I thought that would be quite an interesting way of starting a chemistry lesson, to say, right, okay, you've got these elements here, you've got this here. Your job is to now improvise. Let's pretend you can. What happens if you put this with this? And you just get students to kind of mix up all the, again, if I'm talking rubbish, please tell me in the comments. But you can get students to think about mixing other elements together. And not only are they improvising, they're choosing, but they're also having to think about, right, well, if I put this with this, what will happen? And then that could open up a discussion of, oh, sorry, miss, we've put this and this together. Can you remind me again what that does and what that does? So actually, and this, if we're going back to Simon Purcell here, what we're really doing is we're getting the information out to the student. The student is now thinking, improvising, free thought. What happens if we put this element with this element? They need to think about what two elements work and may not work. But they're also, I had this described by Simon, almost like a, not reverse engineering, but it's the same with a composition. If you take a composition apart, improvisers do that all the time. They take a composition and they kind of they take the elements out, and then they go, right, well, this is the introduction. What happens if I put the introduction to the outro? What happens if I put the outro to the intro? What happens if my developmental theme here, what happens if I change 3 notes of it? So in a way, you're kind of putting the pieces together in your mind, aren't you? And you're doing it with freedom. You're doing it with a curiosity. And that's what I think what improvisation does. It allows us this play. It allows us to kind of play with the possibilities of what if. And like you said, if it's scaffolded in a way, and there's something that we obviously, I think we do need to mention, scaffolded in a way not only to support the student, but also scaffolded to make them safe. It's okay. There are no right or wrong here. You're just trying it. If you scaffold it in that method, hopefully over time, the students will begin to feel comfortable with the idea of improvisation rather than, oh no, because I got taught this way, and if I do it another way, it's not going to go right. And I teach a lot of my cohort in my school are SEN, and I can tell you now, if I speak to a certain student and give them those options, it will absolutely, make almost distraught because they're used to thinking in another way. But if you're putting in the scaffolding, the safety net to say, do you know what, it's absolutely fine. Just see what theoretically, if you put this element with this element, what do you reckon?
The key word being theoretically.
Chemistry teachers, theoretically, I am not liable.
Here's some sodium, here's some water. What would happen?
Yes, please don't.
I think because kids are such good improvisers when they're young. I think it's calling it improvisation, and it's encouraging it to continue, and making them unafraid of it. So I know that I've said to students sometimes, we're going to do some improvisation as part of this topic, and the immediate reaction is, oh no, and it's the fear of getting stuff wrong. And you can say to them, okay, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm sure there was a drinks advert about that. What's the worst that could happen? And the worst that can happen is they play the, in inverted commas, wrong notes, and it doesn't sound good. So, well, to be honest, that's probably going to happen for everybody. Okay, and there's that nice phrase that Nicola Benedetti, the violinist, said. That's when I first heard it. I don't think it's an original, which is, if you don't make mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. Which is, I'm not going to say it's life-changing, but it's wonderful. If you don't make mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. It applies to everything. It applies to everything in life. So it's getting the students really comfortable with the concept of improvisation, the fact that they can do it. They're taking small steps in it. They're getting better at it as they go on through their lives. And it's the confidence you get. I've never met a shy improviser, because, everyone's got that fearlessness of, I'm going to go into a situation, it'll be okay. In job interviews, I know that we've all, I'm sure, been pretty nervous, because you really, really want that job. This, the answers you give could be, yes, I get it, no, I don't get it. So it is high stakes, as opposed to, playing a solo in a band or something. But there's never any stage where I thought, I'm going to sit there with my mouth open, not knowing what to say. And it's almost like, come on, what have you got? Because I've been in that situation in jazz bands where I've had some quite hard chord changes on a piece I don't know, and I'm reading it on the stage, and you have to make these very, very quick decisions. You come out the other end, yes, you made a few slips. You wouldn't want it to be recorded. You don't want anyone to listen to it again, but it was okay.
Yeah.
And for job interviews, university interviews, we all know in our schools, we've all got really confident kids and really shy kids. And the confident ones, if they say, I've got a university interview or I'm doing a presentation, you go, cool, have a good time. You're going to be fine. Other kids, you think, I've got to do such and such. You think, you've got to do what? Are you sure? And if we can get to the situation where we've all got really confident kids, because as well as teaching them the subject and the vocabulary and the skills and the knowledge and all the other things that we can discuss at length another time, you give them that confidence to say, in the words of Bob the Builder, yes I can, or yes we can, or whatever it was. Yeah, and that doesn't come instantly. You can't just say to a kid, be more confident. But they need to learn the confidence, and the improvisation is such a brilliant way of doing that.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. So we'll start to wrap up the conversation on this with really a summary of what can we learn from improvisation? What core skills can it give us as teachers, and how can we give that more importantly to the students that we work with? So we're talking about adaptability. The confidence building. So that comes the adaptability does inspire the confidence. Improvisation and creativity gives us collaboration. It in many ways it's a great equalizer, because when we've meticulously planned something, it depends on whether or not we've spent 4 hours doing it or 2 hours doing it. Whereas with improvisation, it's a great leveler, because everybody starts on the same level. Here's the problem. Here's the creative thing to fix. How do you go about to fix it? Critical thinking.
We admire that. Sorry to butt in, but we admire that. I'm just thinking in terms of sport. So footballers improvise a lot. Now, I know they have their formation. I know they have the managers told them what to do and so on. But situations present themselves, and they have to think really quickly. They use the vocabulary, the skill they have with their feet, their ability to just cross the ball, whatever distance. But we watch, and I don't know how big a football fan everybody listening is, but if you watch a sports person at the top of their game doing something really amazing, YouTube is full of videos of greatest ever goal, greatest ever save, greatest ever, whatever it is. And there is something so awesome about watching that. Or it could be gymnastics or somebody who is just so good that they're making a decision and they do it perfectly. Do you know what I mean? And that's the same with music as well. So the point is that it's not so music specific, but just getting to that stage where we really want to be like these greats, whether it's Maradona or Charlie Parker or whoever, that we can kind of just do that thing. We can make the decisions in the moment. We can adapt. We've got the confidence to do it. And if it doesn't go well, we've got the confidence to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and steam into battle again, not thinking, oh my God, like that time I had to kind of improvise on a 12-bar blues and it was really rubbish. It's going to be relatively rubbish at the start. That's fine. But then I say to the students, when you were learning to walk, when you were little, did you just suddenly, at the age of 2, did you suddenly just jump up one day and stroll off down the street? You probably took 1 or 2 steps and then fell on your backside, and your parents went crazy for you. And then you got the praise, and you tried it again, and for you that was great. And then a child walking 2 steps is not great by the standards of children. For the standards of a little 1-year-old or 2-year-old, it's amazing. Same with language, same with anything. So it's fine. The kids have already come so far in their lives with so many skills. I mean, not to mention language. I mean, a lot of my students speak 2, 3, in some cases 4 languages fluently. Yeah. That didn't happen overnight. It built up. So you can say, I'm introducing you to this particular form of improvisation. These are your baby steps, and that's totally fine. You're not going to sound like Oscar Peterson.
Yeah.
But then you have to think, let me just rephrase that. Is it a great idea if you are teaching improvisation to show the very, very best as the model? So if I'm teaching improvisation on the piano, is it helpful if I show them Oscar Peterson? Because you and I can understand what he's saying with his language and how he's following the chords. It's a completely alien world to the students. So I think, I'm not saying don't play them the greats, but we also need to be realistic. Like with composition, you're composing a piece for orchestra. Okay, well, this is what Mozart did. Fine. but this is what last year's year 11 did. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So this Mozart is not an achievable goal for any of us. It really isn't. Otherwise, we'd be getting operas commissioned or whatever. So this is as good as it can be, but this is what the level I'm expecting. Can you get to this point? Here is a full mark piece of coursework from last year, and isn't it great? Let's look at that as much as we look at Bach or Mozart or whichever subject the greats are in your subject.
Yeah, I think the models we aspire to are also important with improvisation and creativity. And another thing I was going to say is relatability. That if you're putting improvisation or building improvisation into your practice, it's that relatability. It's setting a model to your students that they can aspire to, that they look at and go, oh, I can get to that level of creative thinking.
It's achievable. It's actually achievable.
Yeah, rather than here's Beethoven's First, everyone. Right, okay, we're going to use that model, and then by the end of this term, if you haven't got that, then boo-hoo you. It doesn't necessarily work in that way. So I'll end on a reflective question for everyone listening here, and it's more of I guess it's more of a challenge for you. What one thing can you take away from this conversation that you would like to use for next week and towards the end of the term? What one thing would you like to use for creativity and improvisation? What one thing in your day-to-day can you say, I will use this, I will purposefully think about improvising or spontaneously creating anything? It could be planning, could be classroom management. If you SLT, please don't say timetable, because that's probably not the best thing to do on that one. If there's one thing that you can take and you can literally create and improvise and play with, what would that one thing be? And I think from us listening here, that's going to be a good challenge to set down, because you'll be surprised in terms of what you might think, well, actually, do you know what? I already do this, but I hadn't considered that I could be improvising that. I could actually have been basing this upon decades of teaching. And because I'm, such an expert at it, I don't even think about it. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ways that I can present it. What one thing could you do for your teaching? And I think for me, if I'll start, and then I'll ask you, Patrick, I think for me, in terms of the improvisation, is I want to explore more adaptive learning. So I want to go in and give the main task to my students, but I want to specifically zone in on a couple of students and just observe how they're learning. And I want to kind of use my Rolodex of techniques that I use to get them in there. And I just want to, rather than overthink it, just go in, and I want to see how I can help my students adapt for whatever needs they are, whatever needs they have, and just see how that goes, rather than thinking more methodically and planning it. I just want to observe in the moment and react in the moment and see where it takes me. Does it limit my help? Does it limit the things that I can help them with? Does it make them more confused? Or actually, does it make me more relatable? Does it make me as the teacher feel like I am responding to them in the moment as a person, as opposed to, well, on my list, you have this, so I'm going to do it this way. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at adaptive learning, but I'm going to just rely on my instincts as a teacher to see what I can do. What would you likely do next week, Patrick?
Well, it's stuff that I should probably be doing more of anyway. It's this time of year, we're all tired, it's hot, we're coming to the end of projects, and I've noticed, if I'm totally honest with you, that I've slipped into I don't want to say telling the students how to complete the task, but I've kind of lost the energy, because I'm so tired of other stuff, to actually constantly make them improvise their answers, improvise to an extent the next stage of what they need to do. They're learning pieces. They're actually writing. The year nine's writing a musical, and sometimes it's really working. Sometimes it's not. And instead of just kind of go, you know what? If you just use that chord there, it'll save the song. Go, no, come on, let's experiment. And having the time to kind of keep going, because it is easier to tell students stuff than to to guide them to the correct answer. Not the correct answer, to a solution to their problem. So also to remind them there are multiple solutions to their problems. There are lots of chords that could work in that place in the song. There are lots of ways of explaining something. So I think I just need basically to remind myself that in the cliche, but in the stage of my classroom, it's not enough just to go up there and play some boring arpeggios and whilst thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner. All the time I need to be thinking, this is a new song. I need to find something creative I can do with this. So I'm going to be creative with every single student I work with. And I'm going to, before I open my mouth, I'm going to say to myself, improv, like, how can I get them to do the improv, to find the answer, to find the solution, to ask so many more questions. And it's something I'm actually not bad at the start of the year, but as the year goes on, I find there's so many other things that it's easy just to fall back into routine and the easiest solution. But that doesn't really help the kids, and it's not really fair on the kids.
Yeah. Patrick, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak to me today. Thank you everyone for listening to our talk on improvisation and creativity as Teacher Talk Radio. I'll be back again in 2 weeks' time at the advertised time of 10:30 this time, and I'll be putting out all the details for my next guest. But in the meantime, Patrick, thank you for your insights, and I wish everyone a lovely day. Take care, everyone.
Great.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.